Okay, great. Okay. So, all right. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining. Today's our biweekly individual family meeting, and I didn't invite brokers today because the topic is related to the housing subsidy. There's been a lot of information shared regarding the housing subsidy recently, and just to preface with, OPWDD did put forth some guidance for providers recently, and the information has always been out there, but they never really applied it to the self-direction housing subsidy. So now that we as providers received the very clear email indicating that yes, for individuals in self-direction who have a housing subsidy, they have to follow all of the rules that they are, that I'm going to review with you. So it's always been something that has been out there. It's just never really clear that it involves the self-direction housing subsidy, and it was never really looked at. So now they're requiring, of course, that we're submitting information directly to OPWDD. So I just want to spend some time going over the information on the housing subsidy and answering any questions you might have. And I'm going to share some documents. Again, my intention is to put together over the weekend. I'm going to start working on an agency-specific policy and procedure, and then I'll put together all the forms I'm going to show you. I'll put them in one location on our website so that if you guys want to refer to them after, you can. So let me just share my screen.
I'm going to get that thing as an email. Am I muted?
I just did. I just muted. So if you do want to unmute to say something, this way, if there's any background noise, but if you want to unmute yourself, you have a question. Faye is also here too. So if you want to use the chat between the two of us, we can work that out. But just unmute yourself if you have a question. Okay, so I just want to start with just some general information that OPWDD has state-funded housing subsidy that is often called individual support and services. So prior to self-direction, this individual supports and services, or ISS is what it's short for, was the housing subsidy that the state would use. Because Medicaid does not, you might not know, Medicaid does not pay for housing subsidy. This is 100% state funded. It's designed to help people who are income eligible, who have an intellectual developmental disability and want to live independently, to be able to do so, and to provide that financial support in terms of the housing subsidy assistance. Okay, so the individual can afford housing in private market or in the broader community. They can live alone, with roommates, and or with a live-in caregiver. So about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a change where roommate can be a parent, meaning that if there's tenancy rights for both, then a parent is allowed to be a roommate. And I could talk a little bit more about that if you have questions. But the tenancy rights has to be very clearly defined. So individuals are expected to contribute up to 30% of their income towards the housing costs. This is not straight across the board. It really depends on the budget template and how it's calculated, because there are some deductions, and I'm going to go through in a little while. I'll pull up a template, I'll put some numbers in so you can see how they come up with that amount. Some people don't end up contributing 30% based on some of the deductions. Okay, if people live in shared situations, then the subsidy amount is prorated for the individual's share of the expenses up to a maximum amount based on the methodology. So again, I'll show you when I pull up the template how that looks. Okay, there is also an option for somebody to be eligible for a transition stipend. So this also, people also, oh, hold on one second, somebody is joining. Sorry. Okay, sorry. So just a question. So other than the monthly calculated subsidy limit, is there another annual limit such as IDGS or OTPS? An annual limit. Yes, I'll talk about that when I pull up the template. There is a limit based on the DHCR standards, like the Section 8 standards, in terms of the amount of subsidy that is available. Okay. So the transition stipend, or startup funds, as I am used to hearing it called, is to assist with moving expenses and the initial purchase of essential household goods. That is a one-time payment, and that is when somebody moves. So if somebody is seeking a housing subsidy where they are already currently living, they would not be eligible for that. It's if they're living in a new, moving to a new location. And unfortunately, that is a one-time purchase. Okay, so to be eligible, 18 years or over, have intellectual developmental disability determined. Obviously, if people have already become involved with self-direction, then they're already receiving a waiver service, and that is already done. Have or will have appropriate support services and safeguards, and I'll talk a bit about a letter of justification that is now required for new people applying for housing subsidy, where a person would have to indicate what are the supports and services that are going to be provided in this setting to ensure health and safety needs are being met. Now, this also says has applied for all other benefits that they might be entitled to. So SSI, Social Security, Housing Choice Voucher Program, Section 8, Social Service Shelter Payment, food stamps, HEAP. So any public benefits that they might be entitled to. The state, the goal here is they want to make sure that all those other programs have been applied for. Identify a housing unit that meets the housing quality standards. I am going to show you the, which I did send to everybody who is currently receiving a housing subsidy from us. I sent you the quality assurance checklist, and I'll go over that as well. And it just basically reviews the safety standards that need to be maintained to qualify for this subsidy. And here's the information about tenancy rights. So have or will have tenancy rights that the person have or will have tenancy rights, meaning that the person has or will have an enforceable lease. So we will need to see a valid lease agreement and be financially responsible for the housing unit. And the same rights and responsibilities as any tenant, and the property is legally eligible to be occupied by a tenant, or the individual's name must be on the deed to the home, indicating home ownership, and the individual must be legally and financially responsible for the home. So you can apply for a housing subsidy if the individual owns the home, and a portion of the mortgage, again up to the payment standards, can be requested. But most of what we see has to do with lease agreements where a person is renting, and so they have to have tenancy rights. So a few examples would be, very simple example would be, the individual with the disability is renting an apartment and they live by themselves. They have a valid lease agreement with their name on it as the tenant, and they sign that with the landlord. So that's a very basic standard arrangement. Another example would be a parent owns the home and the parent is leasing the home to the individual with the disability. Okay, the individual with the disability has tenancy rights in that lease agreement, and the parent is the homeowner. So in that scenario, the parent is the landlord, and that income is taxable in that scenario. A third example would be an individual lives in an apartment with a roommate. So we have individuals who live with a partner, a spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend, or a parent, and both parties are listed on the lease agreement, and they both have tenancy rights. Okay, so in that case, when we get to the budget template, you'll see that the roommate, whoever that roommate is, that roommate's information is going to be listed, and the subsidy amount will be prorated based on that shared living arrangement. Okay. What type of housing is acceptable? So I talked about this already. So the single family home, townhouse, condominium, apartment, co-op meets OPWDD's criteria for housing subsidy and is otherwise available to rent, own, or occupy under an agreement by the public and or through a provider agency. We have one example where a person is living in an apartment that we have a master lease on because the landlord required it. We don't typically do that. This was a different kind of arrangement, but that is something that they do allow. Here's another key element that, again, hasn't always been enforced, but the housing unit must be a specific separate unit with a kitchen and bathroom facilities and must meet local and state standards as a legal dwelling unit. Okay, so meaning like the housing subsidy does not support renting a room. Okay. All right, so how to assist a person to apply for a housing subsidy. So OPWDD.
Linda, may I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
So I got a little bit of a blurred line. So when you said not renting a room, but you can have roommates, whether they're parental or other, right? So in that sense, you have tenancy rights, or you have a lease agreement with the parent or the other individual, but people are not necessarily going to have separate bathrooms or separate kitchens. They're going to be shared facilities, right?
Right. Yes. Okay. Right. So I guess it would be, there was a situation in the past where it was one bedroom. So it was presented to us that this person is living with a roommate in a 2-bedroom apartment. The request was that they wanted each person to be considered as having a 1-bedroom apartment. And the reason for that is because the payment standards. So if the payment standard for a 1-bedroom apartment is about $1,500, and the payment standard for a 2-bedroom apartment is about $1,400, if that arrangement was looked at as each person in their 1-bedroom apartment, they would get the $1,300 each. Whereas if it's a 2-bedroom apartment, it's the $1,400 divided by 2.
Right.
So that's, so the whole issue and the reason why people try to look at different ways to describe living arrangement is because that payment standard is so low. We know that. I mean, for New York City, it's really, it's so impossible to find a suitable apartment for $1,300 a month. So I think that's why people are always, well, how can we get the most value out of this? But unfortunately, they say that kind of arrangement wouldn't be allowed. It would have to be a 2-bedroom apartment with a roommate.
Understood.
Okay. So the housing subsidy is the funding of last resort, and so it is. They do want people to be applying for housing options prior to requesting the housing subsidy, and this you can work on with your care manager. So and again, if you already have a housing subsidy, this does not apply, obviously, because you're already set. But as new people looking to apply, they should be working with their care manager and their circle support to apply for affordable housing in New York City. It is very easy to do that. There's thousands upon thousands of people applying for affordable housing units, and a variety of reasons why maybe the unit wouldn't necessarily work in terms of location and neighborhood, and if you want your family member to live near you, but they do want that people do apply for all those benefits that might be available.
Linda, do they look for an application to prove that you've done all this, or is it kind of you just prove?
No, that was not a form that I saw. So I think it might be written in the agreement, that you agree to apply for all generic benefits. But no, we're not going to be requiring any proof of that.
Okay.
Linda, can you hear me, Linda?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What do you mean? What's the last resort? The housing subsidies last resort? I don't understand what that means.
The subsidy that you're getting towards the rent in the self-direction budget, what OPWDD is saying is that this is funding of last resort. So
what would be the preferred?
What they want folks to do is to apply for any kind of other possible benefits. So, like a good example would be the jury, right? So they want to make sure that anything that the person could be eligible for. So we always say in New York City, apply through the Housing Connect website, which is the warehouse for affordable housing. Now, again, Maxine, this doesn't relate to you because he's already set, but new people coming in would want to look for affordable housing options. They'd want to see if they, could apply for Section 8, which again is not open.
I mean, so in other words, they're looking at basically at sort of state like low income housing, and it's going to be harder now to get like regular apartments. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think they just want to make sure that this isn't the first choice, but that people have explored a variety of different housing subsidy options, which there is not a variety of housing subsidy options.
Okay. And I'll mute myself in a second. How secure are we, you think? I guess this is almost like the worst case. In terms of this whole pandemic crisis, it's probably one the worst. We can't even envision a worse crisis unless Trump gets in.
I don't think that we are necessarily. I don't think they're looking to do away with this. What I do think is what I see happening. Again, I can't be 100% sure, but what I see happening is they're looking at, okay, out of everybody that is receiving a housing subsidy, do people have other means of ways to pay for their homes? So somebody said to me, when I get to the template and we talk about income, we'll go over this. But somebody said to me, if the state starts looking at people that have special needs trusts, for example, would they say, hey, the person does have some resources to help pay for their rent. Why should the state pay for that portion of their rent? So again, that's not anything that is being articulated here in any of the documents, but
so they would actually possibly look at special needs trusts?
It's possible. If you think about the whole concept is this is funding of last resort. Somebody is income eligible. So meaning that the income that they have is not sufficient, income or resources that they have is not sufficient to help them to be able to pay their rent in full. So they want to just make sure that, but again, you asked me a question about what I think, and I that's not, looking at special needs trust, not something that is being requested right now.
Yeah, but what I'm thinking is that if that's a possibility, after all, the special needs trust is going to run out eventually, and the special needs trust is for other things,
Right.
So I wonder if there's any way of like getting rid of the special needs trust now.
Yeah, I wouldn't do anything like that. I think it's just at this point, all I'm recommending is, we just need to just shore up the eligibility. So we want to make sure, number one, that the income that's being reported, and I'll get to that in a second. The income is consistent with the budget template, that we have the valid lease agreements, and that we're doing these quality checks. That's all we need to worry about for the moment.
Yeah, but the thing is, with all this stuff, is obviously we had no idea this was going to happen. So I'm really wondering if I should start thinking of, somehow finding a way of taking that money out of Benji's trust.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing that, but that's certainly something you can think about. Yeah, but I don't think that's not my intention of saying something like that.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so this was published in March of 2018. We've, it was clarified recently that this includes the housing subsidy for individuals with self-direction, which is what brings us to this meeting today and some of the requests that I've been, for documentation that I've been asking for. So that's basically, I just wanted to start with an overview of the housing subsidy. So for folks that want to apply, if you're not currently receiving a housing subsidy, if you want to apply and you're using self-direction, we're going to be requesting, when you're working with the broker on a budget template and you get to that housing tab and you start to think about the options and start to fill that out, we will request a few other forms. We'll ask for an agreement document that kind of goes over some of this information here. We'll ask for the proof of income, and we'll ask for a letter of justification. So as I mentioned, I am going to put something together to help just be more clear for folks, and I'll put a sample justification letter. But essentially it would be, why are we looking for a housing subsidy for this individual, and just painting that picture that, whatever the scenario is, the person is living at home with family and is going to be looking to move into an apartment of their own rather than a residential program, and will look to rent an apartment nearby their family so that they have natural supports available, will receive staffing to help ensure health and safety needs are met, has applied for the Housing Connect program. So all of that information we would want to see in a narrative that sort of paints the picture of, why is the person applying for, and to justify the request for the housing subsidy funds. So we would want that letter of justification with the proof of income that would match the budget template and a signed agreement form. So again, that's if you're applying for the first time for a housing subsidy. Once that budget is approved and an apartment is secured, at that point we're going to need to see the valid lease agreement, and we're going to need to see a quality checklist. So and of course the lease agreement and the quality checklist are the two documents that are going to be required annually, along with proof of income. So I'm just opening up the agreement. So this is the agreement, the ISS agreement that OPWDD sent out that they want us to have in place. This is an old form and there's old language in here. So one of the things I'm going to do before I send this out is I'm going to update this to be more specific in terms of self-direction housing subsidy. Because again, this has a lot of old language, but I will, keep the, the required elements in here. But what I want to draw your attention to is the participants' responsibilities down here. So it talks about, applying for and using all generic benefits and allowing visits to the home to assure reasonable health and safety standards are being maintained. In self-direction, we've been told that the broker can act as an arm of the fiscal intermediary to do quality checklists. Also, the care manager can do that. During the time of the pandemic, we are accepting the quality checks. It's okay to do it through Zoom or through FaceTime. I did one the other night, and the person walked me around and I went through all the questions and they showed me their smoke detector, and so that's acceptable at this time. So I will be adding to this under the form when I update it, under where it says participant responsibilities, that we will need to have that proof of income, and that we will need to have that valid lease agreement in order to continue to pay the rent, the housing subsidy portion of the rent. Okay, because that's something new. OPWDD is asking us to send to the liaisons the proof of income and the quality checklists every year, or when things change. So that's why, that's why again we're at this point, because we are needing to have to enforce the guidance that they're providing here. So I'll be adding some information here on the participant responsibilities just to be a little bit more clear. Okay, so this is that agreement form that would need to be completed initially when a person is applying, along with that letter of justification with the budget and proof of income. And then, of course, when an apartment is secured, we'd want that lease agreement and that quality assurance checklist.
Hey, Linda, quick question.
Sure.
For the other benefits that theoretically everybody's tried to do before they've done this, whether it's Housing Connect or the heating subsidy or food stamps or stuff like that, is the broker allowed to help do those forms?
I don't think so, Joe. I think that's really care manager responsibility. That I don't think that would, OPWDD would allow that as a billable service for a broker, since it is something that is the care manager role and responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that's, they're generally
Yes.
speaking, not individually, they're not, I don't know if they're on a fixed salary or not, but they're not economically motivated to do those things.
Yes, that is correct. And as many of you know, you have to really, push the care manager. I have been seeing, some good, some bad, as I'm sure you guys have as well over the years, the experience. But yeah, just as an advocate and as a broker, and us as an FI together, we can really push and pressure care managers to follow the requirements here. Is
there any education like we're getting now on the care manager side that you know of?
Yeah, I mean, they that document that I just shared, interestingly enough, this was, I think I closed it, but that was a MSC advisory from 2018. So they do have information. They were shared information. I know that I have tried to connect with some care managers about doing this particular checklist, and they've said, oh well, we're not doing the face-to-face until January or whenever. So I think they're aware of it, and if they need education, I can certainly send them over all of the information that we've been getting. So I think they knew before us that what had not been super clear is that this relates to self-direction housing subsidies. That was not super clear. So now that that's clarified, yeah, we can work to get them informed if you need.
Thank you.
Okay. So this is the checklist, and I sent this out the other night, that is required to be done on an annual basis. So because OPWDD is requesting all of these forms, we have to send them to the liaisons by on or before November 30th. Then we will request the same thing to be done next year. And this is the state is following Section 8, or the Division for DHCR, Division for Home and Community Renewal standards, and they want to see that there is a smoke detector in the corridor outside of the sleeping area, that they work, that there's an evacuation plan developed with the individual and reviewed related to their living situation, that there's a working landline or cell phone, that there's contact information available and appropriate. So, a recommendation would be to have a list of emergency contacts posted on the fridge, for example. That the home is reasonably clean and well maintained, free from hazardous conditions, that the furnishings are adequate, the home meets the individual's physical needs and requirements, heat, water, electricity, and air conditioning, if applicable, are in good working order, and that there is a working carbon monoxide detector. So if, I know we've seen sometimes the carbon monoxide and smoke detector in one, all in one, and that the person's health, safety, and well-being are reasonably maintained in the home. So I in reviewing these, and I don't know your thoughts, but they seem pretty reasonable. It's not asking for anything to be, it's not saying it has to be perfectly clean, but reasonably clean and reasonably well maintained. And then if and when the person, whoever it is, if it's the care manager or the broker completing this checklist, if there's no to any of these questions, then there's some options for where the person can discuss what the problems are, that they do not seem to be significant threat, or that, what is the plan going to be? What are the alternatives? So there's some options here, and then the necessary steps to address any indicated above issues. So if we see everything is yes, then obviously this section down here doesn't have to be completed. It would just need to be signed. But if we see something that says no, so for example, I don't even know what an example. I mean, all of these things are pretty well maintained, reasonable. So if the smoke detector doesn't work and the answer is no, then maybe it would be, I would check off letter B, and then I would put necessary actions that, the individual has agreed to purchase a smoke detector and have it installed within the week, and will follow up to ensure that it's happened. That might be an example of what we would do, what we would say if there was an answer no to that. Any questions on the checklist?
Yeah, yeah, Linda. A family asked, who is supposed to develop and review the safety plan? The care manager? I said the care manager because I know that's what's been done before, but I know with COVID, a lot of the care managers are pushing it off onto the families and the brokers. What's your take?
Yeah, I think, I know I've done this as a broker in the person-centered planning process. It's not clearly defined who. It really depends on the person's situation. I guess that would be my answer. And I think in terms of the life planning process, I know that the life plan has sections for safeguards. So I think it would be appropriate to have this conversation at a life plan review, and to make sure that whatever the plan is, that it's also incorporated into the life plan. But there could be, I'll give you an example of, if a person is utilizing a wheelchair to move around, there are times where they will contact the FDNY if they're here in the city, or local fire department in Long Island, to let them know that, in this home, a person is living with a wheelchair and they will need assistance with evacuation. So that would be something, I've seen that information identified in a life plan. I've seen it in people's person-centered plans. I'm going to share, New York City has a very good emergency preparedness plan that will go through in detail, does a person have emergency contacts listed? Do they have, if there's a power outage, do they have a working flashlight? All those things that you want to think about when a person is living alone. So I'm going to just make a note to make sure to share that out, because that's a very helpful guide. And again, back to your question, that can be completed even with your self-hired staff. Maybe your self-hired staff would sit with the individual and go through a form like that and answer those questions and come up with a plan. So it could be the self-hired staff, could be parent, could be care manager, and then I think whoever ends up doing it it gets reviewed at the life plan meeting. I think that would then shore it up and make sure everybody's on the same page. Any other questions about this checklist? Sure.
None in the chat.
Okay. Okay, so that's the checklist. I went over the agreement.
Linda,
mhm.
it's Carol. So the checklist has to be videoed by someone? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, so should I ask Evelyn, or what do I?
Yeah, you can.
I don't
Evelyn
think
can
she-
do it, or I can do it. You know, you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I asked her yesterday. She didn't know anything about it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that QA. So just let her know it's a Q. You could forward her that email that I sent to you.
Right.
And there were a few where the care manager was not able to do it. So, you know, we can step in
Okay.
and do that. It's really, and again, not to be intrusive, you know, but just to be able to answer some of those questions.
Okay.
Okay.
So you'll let me know when you want to do it?
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's the Q8 checklist, and I did want, as I mentioned to you, which I think people it's on people's minds. I wanted to bring up a housing tab of the budget. Okay. Okay, so this is what the broker fills out. So you're at the point where you're applying for self-direction. This is going to be blank. For those of you who have a housing subsidy already in the budget, this will be populated. So it's important to review this information and ensure that, especially that the income information is up to date. Now, I'm going to tell you what I think about income. OPWDD is asking that we send proof of income once a year or when changes happen, and that it is consistent with the budget. And if it's not, that a budget amendment be completed. Now, what I'm going to say to that is if a person's income fluctuates, I don't think it's the expectation that we're redoing a budget every month because of income fluctuating. I think what I would say is we need to look at a period of time. If you have pretty set income and that's not really going to change, and then all of a sudden there is a change. So for example, the pandemic, person works and now they're not working and they haven't been working for 6 months. So that's a significant change. So revisiting this with your broker would be important because it could potentially mean maybe an addition in a housing subsidy amount. That's not necessarily the case. It really depends on how this works. But you know, if a person has income fluctuations over the course of the year, so let's say somebody works seasonally, what I would want is, okay, if there's, let's say, SSI award letter that shows $400 a month in SSI, and then, but they work seasonally, so that varies. And maybe we would have a snapshot of a few pay periods and a letter that would go along with that would say the annual income is this, or a tax form that shows what the annual income was for last year. Along with a letter that would describe it. Because if we submit a pay stub, I'm going to assume that that's going to be monthly, right? So I'll say, okay, you're giving me one pay stub. I'll just say, let's times that by 4 weeks in a month, and that's your monthly income. If the monthly income is not that calculated that way, you just have to give us something to support that. I hope that makes sense. So if the income fluctuates, we need to understand the full picture so that we you know, that we can forward that information to the state that says on the budget template, it says monthly wages are $400. Monthly SSI is $400. The pay stub attached shows $200 a week, but they only work, you know, half the year. You know what I'm saying? So we just have to justify and support that income that we're submitting. Okay, so on the budget template, this first part up here on the top left talks about the individual and who else lives there. So other, it says other. So let's say there's a roommate, you would put this is not working. Okay, so let's say there's a one roommate, you would put the one here and you see it automatically changes to 2. So now there's 2 people living in the apartment. And how many bedrooms in the home? So let's put 2 bedrooms in the home. So this section up here is going to drive the allowable housing subsidy based on the number of bedrooms. So now this is saying, okay, this is a 2-bedroom apartment. The total, if you look down to the bottom, I don't know if you can see my mouse, the total at the bottom maximum subsidy is $1,473 for a 2-bedroom apartment. Because I put 2 bedrooms, it's going to say $1,473. If I were to change this and put 1 bedroom, and then I were to remove the roommate, let's say now the person is living alone, it changes to $1,324. That is the maximum housing subsidy for a 1-bedroom apartment. Okay, so let's keep it for now. We'll just go through the 1 person living alone in a 1-bedroom apartment. Very straightforward. Income would be SSI $800 a month. We would want to see an award letter that would support that. So that would be very simple. And as we scroll down, so this is the income section here. So you could see SSI, SSDI, which is if your child receives disabled adult child benefits, maybe under your work history, parents' work history, or if they receive Social Security disability based on their own work history. Or survivor's benefits. Okay, sometimes people get a combination, so they might have, you know, $600 in SSI and $200 in survivor's benefits, so it would look like that, and we would want to see the award letters that show both amounts. Okay.
And a quick question on those incomes. I've been made aware of something called DAC. Do you understand?
Yes, so DAC is the Disabled Adult Child Benefit. So Social Security disability has the 3 categories. The one would be your Social Security as a disabled adult child, meaning the individual's parent worked and is now, the parent has retired or has become deceased or is collecting disability benefits on their own. Then their child is eligible for those disabled adult child benefits. Sometimes it knocks out SSI because the amount exceeds the SSI threshold. Sometimes the individual can get both. So that's the DAC. And then in addition, individuals with disabilities who work themselves after working a certain amount of quarters, they could be eligible for Social Security disability benefits themselves. And when I say eligible, Social Security requires that you apply for it and then you get it.
So the adult child, or even before adult, right, is getting SSI, and the parent hasn't retired or is not collecting Social Security themselves. Which one are they getting? Are they getting
SSI?
Okay.
They're getting
Getting
SSI.
SSI. So that's income and disability for themselves, and then that might change when the person's parent retires, becomes deceased, or becomes disabled themselves. Then when that parent goes to apply, they list that they have this adult child who's with a disability, and then they merge the case, they reevaluate, and they say, okay, now this person is eligible for, you know, $1,200 in SSDI. And that Social Security amount based on the DAC is based on the parent's work history. So that's why that amount varies. And I'm glad we're talking about this, because if this happens, and again, it's required to happen. You can't say, no, I only want my child to get, you know, keep them at the 800.
Right.
You can't do that. So once that does happen, that's going to change the calculations here, and would probably require that the individual with the disability contributes towards the rent because their income has increased. So this whole template is looking at what is the person's countable income, what is the person's rent, what is the state's maximum housing subsidy allowance, and then at the end of it, this is how much they're going to be able to pay because of those calculations.
So just quick recap, SSDI is DAC basically, or DAC is a portion of SSDI?
DAC is a portion, right? Because again, SSDI also includes a person who's getting Social Security based on their own work history.
Right, right.
Linda, there's
maybe
3
the
questions in the
client
chat.
who's getting that.
Right.
So if someone is getting Social Security, and you have a disabled child, your disabled child is entitled to extra money from that from the retired parent's Social Security.
Yes, yes, and
However, it sort of gets, if you're getting the housing subsidy, it kind of like cancels it out, because then you end up having to contribute that much more to the housing subsidy.
okay, so I think this is an awesome topic for another meeting, because we
Yes.
should talk about this, because this is important. Talking about DAC and Social Security and SSI and income and parents' retirement. So I'm gonna make sure we talk
For
about
another meeting.
Yes. However, just as you pointed this out, it is not, it's not an option. So if you retire, if you are a parent who retires, becomes disabled, or if there's a parent passes, then Social Security is going to require that your disabled adult child receive the DAC benefits. So, yeah,
And
so,
so how
they
much
would get
does that,
income.
what percentage of that income of the retirement income does the child get?
It varies. It varies. It
varies
depends
on
how
how
many
much they work.
parents, how many quarters they worked. So let's table that, and I will make sure to have an expert also, because that is an important conversation. Okay.
And
Okay,
also,
Linda, we
we
have
also
3
talk,
major questions in
for
the
that
chat.
for that other conversation, can we also talk about, also, I understand that the disabled child also qualifies for Medicare once the.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just
Okay.
take.
Okay.
3 major questions in
Okay.
the chat, and we have to get to them. So do we have to write lost wages due to COVID?
Lost wages. So, okay, so we're just asking for proof of income. So if a person was working and they stopped working due to COVID, they should have applied for unemployment, right?
Well, that's me, Linda, who's asking.
Okay.
Because
So-
I remember I wrote you this morning.
Yes,
If you
yes.
remember, I know you have 700 probably people who write you. Yeah, but see, I didn't apply for unemployment for him because I was afraid because of his Social Security, and I probably should have. But at the beginning, I really wasn't sure, and later I kind of thought I figured out that unemployment is considered unearned income.
Right.
But the other thing is, and the other thing is too, he would have gotten, just like I did, and this is just between all of us, but it doesn't matter. I got way more money than I made during a regular week because I got the extra $600. Right. I don't know how many weeks, then I got 3. And he would have gotten that too.
Yeah. So I think Denise, you're okay. As long as he's okay and you're okay.
Yeah, I'm just saying, now all I'm going to have to show you is a new award letter he got. He just happened to get a new one.
Yes.
They reevaluated, they did his yearly thing, and they said, oh, you should get this much money, a little bit more money.
Yeah.
But I have, and he has no wages right now.
So put that also, because in his life plan, it's going to indicate that he works. So just jot down a little letter that says, due to the pandemic, he is currently not working. We're not sure when he's going to be returned to work. At which time he does return to work, we will forward the pay stubs, and we will reevaluate his budget.
And also, like you just said, that we could do for another time, because honestly, I will probably be applying for Social Security.
Yeah, and
then
I think
now that's
part of that
again at some point.
Part of that, I think we should also talk about is wages. Social Security as it relates to wages. All of these things interplay. So I wrote that down. I think it's a very good topic. I was running out of topics, and this is a good one.
Okay. Second question. If someone is living alone in a 2-bedroom apartment, how does it change the max household subsidy?
Okay, let's do it. Let's do that. That's a good question. So one person living in a 2-bedroom apartment, it still defaults to the 1-bedroom standard. Okay, so that answers that. Was there another one?
Okay. Yes. Do we have the formulas in the Excel sheet to try different scenarios to see max household subsidy, or is it locked?
No, it's right here. So what I would suggest you do is just download, again, this is for the broker. Parents can do this too. You could download the Excel budget template, and then you're just going to be playing around with it. But again, we have to have, so I'm saying this, I'm recording it, I probably shouldn't, but working with people over the years, I have kind of like, okay, let's put this in, let's put that in, let's see what we can get. But now they are requiring proof of income. So we can't, the proof of income has to be accurate. So let's work this through, okay? So we've got one person in a 1-bedroom apartment. Let's say, let's keep it clean, that their income, or easy, not clean, that their income is $800 a month in SSI benefits. So if you scroll down here, you see, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but row 34 has deductions. A bunch of these deductions say NA, meaning the state has said, we don't care about your Medicaid out-of-pocket medical expenses, any health insurance premiums. So that's very unfortunate because that could help people that have out-of-pocket health and premiums and expenses, but they are indicating here that it's not applicable. The template automatically reduces $200 from a person's income, and they deduct the $200 based on a personal allowance equivalent. So a person with $800 income, the net income goes down to $600. Okay. There is a row here, 43 daycare expenses. I don't know how many people are going to qualify for that. And then other eligible deductions. Now, I haven't really used this a lot. Somebody had asked a question about work-related expenses, that SSI allows work-related expenses. So maybe there's $100 a month. It does say in the guidance that the OPWDD staff would have to review and approve that. So if you feel that there are other eligible deductions, again, I don't have a list. I don't know what they're going to say is okay or not okay. Apparently, health-related deductions is not okay. But if you wanted to apply for work-related expense, I would put forth a written justification for that. And I think there's a very good possibility it would be approved because Social Security allows that. So work-related expense.
Go
ahead.
Yes, though, is you'd have to have wages.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so let's keep that blank for now. We're going to take that out. So $800 turns to $600 net income. Let's say that the household cost, it's a straight rental apartment of $1,500 a month. And let's say that electric is not included. If heat, gas, and electric is included in the rent, this would be zero. But let's say that you pay $50 a month in electric. Oops, we put that there. That helps. Let's say you get renter's insurance. Now, nobody's asking for proof of renter's insurance, but they might. So for now, they're not. But let's say you pay renter's insurance, $25 a month. By the way, renter's insurance is pretty inexpensive, and it covers the contents for renters. And so now you come down here, you see down below, it says on row 67, calculated maximum monthly housing subsidy allowed, $1,219. So what this is saying is that the individual has to contribute the additional $105 or whatever it is, the up to the $1,500. They have to pay for that out of pocket. Okay, so of course, then I would come in here and I would put the $1,219 because we want to request the max. So that's a pretty simple, straightforward. Now let's do some different scenarios. So let's go up to, let's go and change the income a bit. So if we had somebody who was getting $600 in SSDI and then had wages of $1,000 a month. So you see how it changes it, right? So now the maximum row 67, which is the line you're looking at, changes to $979. So now we're going to be asking for the $979. So again, what that means is that if this individual finds an apartment that they love and want to rent for $1,500 a month and are living alone, that self-directed housing subsidy can only be requested up to the $997 a month. The difference has to be paid for by the individual. Okay, and that this is something I am going to include in that agreement I showed you. I'm going to add a little bit because I want people to understand that we cannot pay more than what's indicated here. It has to be approved here. The other point to keep in mind is if rent goes up, which rents do go up, that this doesn't change. I mean, these amounts haven't changed in a long time. So as you're looking to plan for the future or thinking about current situations, make sure that there is income resources available to help supplement the person's part of their rental cost. Let's keep working this out. We can do another scenario. So we can do individual living with a parent in a 2-bedroom apartment. The parent is a roommate. The lease agreement is with management agency ABCD, and on the lease it's renting to parent Sally and individual with a disability Joe. So both names have to be on the lease agreement because that's what shows joint tenancy rights. Okay. Again, if we do the income, so now it opens up. There's also, I'm sorry, we have to change this to type of housing, market rate apartment. If a person is in subsidized housing, it's going to decrease the amount. So let's just keep it straightforward, market rate. Now it's going to be asking for, because I put 2 people, it's going to be showing down here under housing costs. The rent is $1,500. It says the individual share and the dependent share. Let me see, why isn't this populating? Okay, it should shift. It doesn't show the amounts, but anyway, it cuts down the individual share to $750 because that person is living with a roommate. Now, if you have 2 individuals with disabilities, both having self-directed housing subsidies, then this particular budget would have, this amount, $355, and the other person's budget amount would have whatever their share is. So you'd have to work it out with the brokers to make sure that the budgets are in sync. Any other scenarios, you guys, while I have the budget template here, that you want me to run through? Again, if you notice, if we take out, let me just change this back. I'm going to take out the roommate, drop it back down to a 1-bedroom, and increase the income a little bit here. If you notice that the, let me take this out. If I take out the renter's insurance, it's going to adjust it a little bit. So the budget here in the housing subsidy tab is and the budget does not pay for renter's insurance, but if a person has renter's insurance, it's a deduction. Okay. The heat, gas, and electric, again, if it's not included in the rent, it's listed here as a deduction. Now you can also put that in the OTPS section and get reimbursed for that. But here it's listed as a deduction. So if it's, if it's included in the rent and I take it out, again, it's going to drop this down. So the purpose of showing this to you is to help you to understand that it's calculated based on income, household size, amount of people that are living in the home, the rental cost, and that this Excel file, it has all the calculations in there to help you when you're planning to see how much rent the individual is going to have to contribute and how much rent the budget can contribute.
Linda, just wanted to add as well, it depends on the county that you're living in, because if you do live upstate, we don't have anybody upstate, but if you do live upstate, it does change the cost, I believe.
Okay.
For the house.
Yes, it is a regional rate. You're absolutely correct.
Linda, quick question on the subsidy again. So it's basically just coming up and saying, okay, you have to kick in X amount of money based on these calculations, correct?
Correct.
But it doesn't check whether or not you actually have enough money in your personal capability.
It doesn't.
So theoretically, if a parent was subsidizing it, there's no harm, no foul.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and that again, that's not that, you know, that we would probably want to see something like that in letter of justification. You know, we'd probably want to see that written somewhere that, yeah, the rent is $1,500, the person's contribution towards the rent, you know, is going to be covered by the parent.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would think that the landlord would want to see that.
Yeah, yeah. So that you know, it's 104. I want to honor your time. I think, you know, if you please keep letting me know if there's questions. Like I said, I am going to put this together in a more complete written guidance document that would be like for CFS, and I will share it with you. But just as an overview, there's the application process. Oops. Sorry, hold on. This is so the application process for somebody who's applying for the first time to work with their broker on determining needs in that person-centered planning process. The broker would help to complete a justification letter, complete the budget template, provide the individual would provide proof of income that would match what's listed on the budget template. And again, if there's any variations, to write a letter to support any variations to the income so that we have a complete picture. And then that agreement form would be signed. So sometimes most of the time people would do a budget without having an apartment yet. And then once that budget's approved and you start looking for an apartment, you're going to need to submit a valid lease agreement to us and the QA checklist. So those are the things that we would need to initiate the housing subsidy. Then on an ongoing basis, we need a QA checklist to be completed annually. So like I said, we'll probably do October, November next year as well, that we'll start requesting that. And that could be done by the care manager or the broker. And you're going to also need to submit proof of income. If income changes dramatically, work with the broker on a budget amendment. And when you're submitting it, ensure that it's in line with what's indicated on the budget. And then if not, you'd have to do the work on the budget amendment. For landlords, to set up payment with us like any other vendor, we're going to need that W-9 form to be completed by the landlord. So we will pay the landlord that's on the listed on the lease agreement as long as we get that W-9 in the lease agreement. We've had situations where parents want to be reimbursed because the landlord will not accept a third-party payment, and that's fine. In order for us to reimburse, you will need to submit proof of payment, and then we would initiate that request. We have the ability for housing subsidy to set up reoccurring payments so that you don't have to do it every month. It'll just automatically load up on the first, and that's if we're paying the landlord directly. And if we have then them set up as a vendor. That's all that I have. Anybody have any questions, comments?
There are none in the chat.
Okay. Okay, so I know this is a lot to throw at you, and I hope my follow-up information will be helpful. But I think this was a good topic, and I appreciate that the suggestion, you know, and I think for the next meeting or future meetings, we will definitely have one on Social Security, because I know that it does there's a lot of questions about that. I want to make sure to get you the right information. Okay, so if there's nothing else, I mentioned before, as I don't know if all of you were on